A lot of your running back brethren are really not. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, just to name a few. The latest, I mean, Pollard signed the tag, so it looks like he's going to play for the Cowboys this year. But for Saquon and Josh Jacobs, Tiki, what do you tell these guys? Because I don't know what advice you have for them. No one likes it, but you can kind of see where the market's going, right?
Well, Maggie, unfortunately, they have zero leverage. There's nothing that they can do. Nothing they could do leading up to the tag deadline. But now there's certainly nothing they can do. And as I said earlier today when I was on the midday with Sal, I said, if I'm Saquon, the only control that I have is to go out and be an awesome this year. You know, rush for 1,500 yards, scored 12 touchdowns or whatever it may be. That's the only thing that's left in his control. And it's a shame what's happened to the position, because there was an era, and it's not that long ago, where you needed a guy who could give you 25 to 30 carries. You could trust him on the field every down. He was the difference maker. He would do the grinding work, and every now and then he'd split one and demoralize the opposing team's defense. But offense has changed. It's become so wide open, and you can blame the kids. Really, you can blame Mike Shanahan and his kid, and then all the kids that came, with him, for making offenses so varied and complex, and throwing the ball to run the ball, bubble screens, and all these little shovel passes, these things that simulate runs that have devalued the position. So all he can do is take it and go try to be great this year. There's nothing else that can be done at this point.
Well, what about the holding out option? Their first game against Dallas, week 1, Sunday Night Football. That would be the loudest holdout since Emmitt Smith, in my opinion. Does that do anything for Saquon Barkley? At least he'd save a little wear and tear. He might cost him a little money, but he'd save a little wear and tear before he hit free agency.
You know what it does? It'll piss off Giants fans. Yep. It'll make them upset with him for not being there for one of the most important games to start the season. And you mentioned Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith could do it back then because the franchise tag wasn't the same. And I don't think it was available. And so what the franchise tag has become, unfortunately for running backs, is a tool that only works for the organization. It used to be, you're going to get franchise tag, at least you're going to get paid a lot of money. But there's not a lot of top paid running backs. So the franchise tag, as crazy as that sounds, is like the 5th highest paid player at the position in the NFL. So the average of the top 5 salaries, cap numbers, which is how they measure it doesn't really do anything for you. It should be punitive for the team, but at $10 million, that's not punitive other than the cap hit. But a lot of teams can absorb $10 million for the running back position. It's still only about 8 or 9% of the cap. It's not something that is untenable for a lot of these teams.
Tiki Barber is joining us. He's the Giants' all-time leading rusher, former Pro Bowler, and we're talking about running backs because they've been the topic in the NFL with not getting long-term deals done as the franchise tag deadline expired yesterday, and you got Bupkis. Tiki, for Austin Eckler, was on with our buddy Zach Gelb, and kind of had this sort of don't poke the bear, was his comment. Like, you don't want to tick off running backs. Like, you're telling me the best thing that Saquon Barkley can do is like have an all-pro season for the Giants. That's not exactly getting back at them. That's helping them achieve their goal. When Austin Eckler says, poke the bear, what kind of threat can he possibly be talking about?
Well, I mean, I hate this for Austin Eckler because I really like him. When we were doing your show, when we were on the national show, we had him on a lot. And I enjoyed talking to him because he's a very smart, intellectual kid. He grinds. He kind of came from nowhere and turned to one of the more important pieces out in that Chargers offense. But he's 28 years old. And as a 27-year-old, Dalvin Cook is getting offered less than $5 million a year. So I know what he's saying, but there isn't a lot of fight available for running backs. And the position it's evolved to a thing that requires a specific coordinator and a specific offense to want that guy in order for it to be valuable. The perfect example is Kyle Shanahan with Christian McCaffrey. Now, he's not going to get paid again either, but Kyle Shanahan and with Christian McCaffrey, that offense gets really exciting and explosive. So unless it's like very specific, Derrick Henry for Tennessee, very specific, or Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. You're not going to get these guys paid. And it's unfortunate because it used to be you had to have a great running back. Now it's by committee. And since there are 3 or 4 of them, I kept seeing these things. My buddy sent me a meme that said running backs are paid less than kickers on average. It's like $1.8 million. For kickers, it's $2.2 million. But that's because teams have 3, sometimes 4 running backs. And most of those guys are making under $1 million. And maybe one guy is making 5 or 6 or 10. But it's just the reality of the situation in the NFL for RBs. And it stinks. As someone who played the position and who was counted upon to have 350 plus touches a year, I miss that era, but it's gone. Just like the tight end used to be a big part of offenses, back in the day. Now they're basically big wide receivers, tight ends. Running backs have kind of, I don't want to say they've expired because you always need one, but you don't need a high paid one. That's the problem.
So, Tiki, if you look at sort of the grassroots, I know you know grassroots football. If you're a star athlete, will you think you'll go away from running back? And obviously, I know you could have played another position because your twin brother played another position. Yeah. I don't know, how did you become a running back and Rondé a defensive back? And is that something, if you were coming up today, you might think twice about?
Well, because I was faster.
Okay.
I was bigger and I was tougher. I could take the hits. Right? Rondé was a wimp.
But if you want to get paid now, that's what you should do.
You know what I would do, Andrew, is I would play wide receiver. So one of the things that has happened, in addition to not being able to hit quarterbacks, is you can't hit wide receivers either. Think about in the 80s and 90s, all wide receivers were big, 100, 215 pound, 6'4" guys. Now you look at the Tyreek Hills of the NFL, even Odell Beckham Jr. These guys are smaller. Why? Because speed is at a premium. When you have it, it's like you can feel it, and you can't destroy those guys going across the middle like Steve Atwater used to do. You can't do that. It's like John Lynch used to do. You can't do that anymore. And so receivers have gotten smaller. So if I was coming up now and I had good hands, which I did, obviously, I'd play wide receiver, because I know there's a better chance of me getting paid being a wide receiver than there is one playing running back.
Tiki, no. Last year, Perloff said that wide receiver is the new running back, and I disagreed. And then
he was right.
And he thinks that now wide receiver is going to be the next position that the league's going to come for, and teams are just going to cycle through wide receivers, and no one's going to get paid.
Well,
Well, I mean, look, when you have an elite one, right?
But the Vikings got rid of Diggs and then just drafted Jefferson. It's not exactly what I said. Why are there like 9 great receivers that enter the league every year now? It's kind of funny the way that's been happening.
Well, because think about it. You talked about like grassroots football, but think of 7-on-7 football.
Yep.
This is what teams or kids are doing these days. Like all my friends that are have high school level kids, they're not preparing by grinding in the off seasons and lifting weights. They're doing 7-on-7 camps.
Sounds nice, actually.
Yeah, right. Like the wide receiver has become the most important position because teams use and deploy 4 or 5 of them sometimes, right? And it's just the evolution of football. There's a really good podcast you guys should listen to, or your listeners should listen to if they have The Athletic. And in fact, you can get it on things outside The Athletic. It's called The Play Callers. It's about Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay,
the LaFleurs,
Matt LaFleur. And who's the last one? McDonald, Mike McDonald down in Miami.
Yeah, Mike McDaniel.
It details how they evolved offense. It all started with Mike Shanahan's, stretch zone plays, right? And they just evolved off that. They put the bootleg in, and then they put the same level, like the fake toss and the same level bootleg with the toss. It's so much crazy stuff that offenses are doing these days. Unfortunately, it doesn't require a running back, right? I'm serious. Think about the Rams. They won a Super Bowl. The leading rusher was Cam Akers. You saw that meme today. You know how many yards he had? 21.